He hadn't seen his daughter in 17 years. He barely knew her kids, and the last thing he wanted was a summer of second chances. But when 3 grandkids landed on his doorstep, each carrying their own heartbreak, something unexpected began to grow on that forgotten Vermont farm. Not lavender, not olives, but the fragile roots of a family trying to find its way back. This isn't just a story about silence, regret, or stubbornness. It's about what happens when you stay long enough to let love speak again. If stories of healing, redemption, and quiet transformation speak to your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Moments That Heal. We bring you powerful tales that linger long after the screen fades to black. Now, let us take you to that summer, the one no one saw coming, but no one ever forgot. Frank Whitmore wasn't the type of man who liked surprises. And yet there he was, standing stiffly at the edge of Maplewood Station with the sun biting into his skin and a frown digging lines deeper into his weathered face, faced with 3 of them. 3 kids. 3 strangers, really, with his wife waving cheerfully beside him as if nothing were out of the ordinary, like it was any other day someone dropped their grandkids off like a bag of groceries. Frank didn't move when they stepped off the train. The girl with the headscarf rolled her eyes immediately. The older boy looked like he'd rather be dead than standing in front of a rundown pickup, and the youngest one, a boy with wild hair and eyes too soft for the world, just blinked. "Frank," Martha said gently, nudging him, "take the bag." He didn't say a word. He just grabbed the duffel out of her hand, turned on his heel, and headed for the truck without so much as looking at the children. His jaw was set, his eyes cold. Behind him, the sound of hesitant footsteps and dragging suitcases followed like ghosts. 17 years. That's how long it had been since his daughter had disappeared into a man's arms and vanished. Not a call, not a letter, and now out of nowhere she was getting divorced and decided to send her 3 kids to him, as if he were some halfway house for broken families. Frank clenched the steering wheel harder as he pulled away from the station. In the back seat, Lily spoke up first, her tone sharp with adolescent irritation. "This thing doesn't even have AC?" He didn't turn. "If you're hot, roll the window down." She scoffed and crossed her arms. The boy beside her, Alex, groaned, "God, where are we even going? This looks like something out of a horror movie. Do you at least have a pool?" Frank replied flatly, "Sure, with a built-in hot tub and champagne bar." The youngest one, Theo, leaned forward between the seats. "Will we have Wi-Fi?" "No idea, but I've got a phone if that helps." Alex sighed dramatically. "Great, just what we needed, a vacation from hell." Frank threw him a look through the rearview mirror. "Waiting on a bellhop to carry your bags, too?" When they finally pulled up to the farmhouse, nestled deep in the hills of Vermont, the sun was already beginning to dip. The wooden porch sagged slightly under the weight of years, and the scent of grass and earth filled the air. Martha tried to mediate. "Frank, you could have told me. You didn't say they'd be staying all summer." "They weren't supposed to," he said, voice low, "but apparently surprise parenting is in style now. Eleanor's going through a hard time. Divorce is not easy," Martha said. Frank just huffed. "It's been 17 years, Martha. You think she could have managed a phone call?" The kids didn't say anything as they dragged their bags up the creaking steps. Frank, reluctantly, pulled an old mattress out of storage and climbed to the attic. It was the only place with enough space for the boys. From up there, grumbling began immediately. "This is gonna suck," Alex groaned. "No signal, no AC, 2 fricking months." "We'll survive," Lily said, though she didn't sound confident. They found a weak phone signal in the corner of the attic, enough to placate their anxiety for a moment. Downstairs, Martha was already setting the table for dinner. The aroma of beef stew and roasted eggplant filled the kitchen. At the table, things only got more awkward.
Theo pushed his plate away. "I don't want to eat the cow. Cows are good. Cows are friends." Frank frowned. "That one wasn't a good cow. That cow was a bully. Pushed the nice cows around. Deserved it." Theo considered this carefully. "Oh, okay. Then." Lily inspected her plate suspiciously. "I'm vegetarian, and this much methane is literally destroying the ozone layer." Alex took one bite and gagged. "Ooh, is that garlic?" Frank raised an eyebrow. "In the South, they cook with garlic. In India, it's curry. 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 Here, garlic." Dinner ended quickly. Once the kids retreated upstairs, Frank grumbled, "What's wrong with these kids? Lily's got that thing on her head like she's leading a cult. Alex moves like molasses, and the little one won't stop talking to frogs." Martha gave him a pointed look. "Did you forget how you were at that age?" "I wore flowers in my hair," Frank replied, "not nose rings." "She's expressing herself. And you need to stop grumbling and start talking. Actually talking. Go sit with them. Make an effort." He muttered, "I wouldn't know what to say." Upstairs, the kids weren't exactly singing Frank's praises either. "I can't believe we're stuck with Grandpa Grump for 2 months, Lily sighed. "By the time I get married, I'll probably have PTSD. "Who says you're getting married?" Alex replied. "It's a scam. Just people yelling at each other for 40 years. "Except Grandma and Grandpa. They never fight. How the heck do they manage that?" "Probably because she's a saint and he's deaf," Alex said. The next morning, Frank walked into the living room and tripped over a long extension cord. "What in the hell?" Alex looked up. "Just boosting Wi-Fi." "Through 1,000 feet of tripping hazard?" "I'm good. You're good. Everyone's good." Frank sat down with a grunt. "You know that the internet has viruses, right?" Alex blinked. "Like malware?" "Like actual viruses that'll crawl out and get you." Alex stared, then chuckled. "It doesn't work that way." Frank waved him off. "And I don't want a Facebook or Snapogram or whatever nonsense you kids are using." Minutes later, Frank marched upstairs and sent his dog bounding into the attic. A scream. "Seriously? The dog?" "I was sleeping," Lily yelled. She came down irritated and lit a cigarette near the porch. Frank was waiting. "You don't smoke in my house." Alex jumped in. "What's that supposed to mean? You don't want us here? Just say it." "I didn't ask for you," Frank snapped. "Your mother didn't either." "No," Alex said, "but here we are." Frank stood. "The truth is, I don't care if you hate it here, but you will respect me. And respect isn't free. You earn it." Martha called from inside, sensing the tension boiling. Frank stepped back, jaw clenched, heart racing. The war between generations had begun. And no one, not even Frank, could see just how much this summer would change them all.
That night, the Vermont heat hung low like a wet towel, and the crickets sang loud enough to drown out even the silence. Inside the old farmhouse, the walls felt closer, the air heavier. Dinner wasn't going to fix anything, but Martha tried anyway. "Lily, sweetie," she called up the stairs, "come down for dinner." No answer. "I said dinner," she repeated, louder. A slow shuffle, then Alex appeared, followed by Lily, arms crossed, chin lifted like she was heading into a courtroom instead of a dining room. Frank was already seated, hands on the table like he was bracing for impact. Theo, always the buffer, skipped in and slid into a seat with wide, innocent eyes. Martha set the cast-iron pot down in the center. Beef stew with eggplant. A little something special tonight. Theo frowned at his bowl. "Wait, this is cow? I thought we were done eating cows." Frank didn't skip a beat. "That was a bad cow, Theo. It bullied the other cows. No one liked it." Theo blinked. "Oh, then that's okay, I guess." He picked up his spoon and cautiously took a bite. Lily raised her eyebrows. "You're joking, right?" Frank didn't flinch. "Nope."
Lily set her spoon down. I don't eat beef or anything that belches methane. You know, ozone layer, global collapse, climate apocalypse. Frank muttered, "Can't wait to hear what's wrong with tomatoes next." Alex shoved a bite into his mouth and instantly gagged. "Is that garlic?" he coughed. Frank gave him a flat look. "You're in Vermont. People cook with garlic. Louisiana, they use cayenne. In India, curry. Here, garlic. Learn to live." Theo raised his hand, unbothered. "Do we have any bananas?" Martha smiled patiently. "Only peaches, honey." "Okay," he said, digging into one. Lily pushed her plate away. "Is there tea?" "Check the black bag in the pantry," Martha said, without skipping a beat. Lily left the table and returned with a packet of herbal tea. She set about boiling water like she was camping, ignoring Frank entirely. Alex and Theo munched on fruit, while Frank watched them all as if trying to read a puzzle in a language he'd never learned. There was no laughter, no small talk, just forks clinking against ceramic, the distant sound of cicadas, and enough tension to snap a fence post. When the kids finally excused themselves and climbed back upstairs, the air deflated. Frank leaned back with a sigh. "I don't get it. What the hell happened to kids?" Martha folded a dish towel over her shoulder. "Maybe you forgot what it was like to be young." "I wore flowers behind my ears," he grunted, "not explosives." "They're earrings, Frank." "She's got more metal on her than a junkyard. If Homeland Security had a sniff of that getup, she'd be face down before she could say organic kale." Martha crossed her arms. "Frank, listen. I am not spending the entire summer listening to you rant. You're going to talk to them, like a person, not a warden." "I wouldn't even know where to start." "Then sit next to them. Ask them about their lives. Don't wait for permission. Just go." But Frank didn't go. He stood by the kitchen sink, arms folded, chewing on the silence. Upstairs, the conversation was no better. "I'm not doing this," Lily muttered, as she collapsed onto the creaky attic bed. 2 months with Grandpa Grinch in the middle of nowhere? I'm gonna lose my mind. Alex was fiddling with a bundle of charging cords and adapters. He'd just find the Wi-Fi. "If we've got even one bar, I can make this place tolerable." "You're such a dork." "Dork with internet is better than rebel without a cause," he mumbled. Lily rolled her eyes. "Seriously, what do you think Grandma sees in that man? 40 years and she's still married to him? Did she lose a bet?" "He must have been different once, less grumpy. Or maybe she's just patient. Either way, she deserves a statue." "Or sainthood," Lily added. Theo piped up from the corner where he was playing with a travel-sized Lego set. "Maybe they're superheroes, like super old but still together." Alex gave him a tired smile. "Yeah, buddy, maybe they are." By morning, Frank had already been up for hours, tending to the olive grove, fixing a squeaky barn door hinge and swearing under his breath about a broken faucet in the greenhouse. The day just began, and he already needed aspirin. On his way back to the house, he stopped short. A thick orange extension cord stretched from the porch, wrapped around the side of the house, through a window, and presumably into the attic. What the? He followed it, yanked the screen door open, and found Alex sitting in the parlor with his laptop plugged in. "Is that my chair?" Alex looked up, completely unfazed. "I think so. Sorry. Kinda." Frank narrowed his eyes. "What's with the cord?" "Needed signal. It's like an electromagnetic burial ground out here." Frank grumbled and sat down with a huff. "You know the internet gives you viruses, right?" Alex snorted. You mean like computer viruses?" "Same thing." Alex chuckled. "I'll be fine, Grandpa." Frank leaned back. "Martha said you're into computers." "Yeah, I'm going to study software engineering when I graduate." "Great. The world needs more people hiding behind screens." Alex smirked. "I could make you a Facebook account, friend you even." Frank stared at him like he'd offered him a rash. "God, no!" Laughter broke the tension like a match to kindling. It was the first genuine sound between them. "Fair enough. Alex said, still smiling. Later that morning, Frank whistled and his old retriever Scout bounded over. With a glint at his eye, he gave a quiet command. Seconds later, chaos. "No, Scout, get off!" Lily screamed from upstairs. The dog had found his target, bounding into the attic and waking her up with wet, joyful sniffs. When she stumbled downstairs, rumpled and furious, she grabbed a cigarette. Frank was waiting by the door. "You light that in my house, I'll throw you off the porch." She froze, eyes narrowed. "What's your problem?" Alex demanded, appearing behind her. "You got an issue with everything we do?" Frank squared his shoulders. "I don't appreciate attitude." Newsflash, nobody appreciates being dumped in the middle of nowhere with a man who barely speaks. "I didn't ask for this either," Frank shot back. "Yeah, neither did we. Mom didn't tell us a damn thing. Not about you, not about this place, nothing." Frank's face darkened. "What did she say about me?" "Nothing," Alex snapped. "She never talked about you, not once. That's how much she wanted to forget." The silence that followed was like a slap. Frank stepped back, as if the words had knocked the wind out of him. "You haven't shown me an ounce of respect." "And you haven't earned it," Alex said, voice low and steady. "Respect isn't automatic." They stared each other down, two men generations apart, but both old enough to know what pain felt like. Frank turned sharply. "Martha, get the keys. I'm taking them back to the station." For a second, no one moved. Then Martha's voice rang out from the kitchen. "Frank, sit down!" But the line had been crossed, and what began as a summer vacation was quickly turning into something more like a battlefront.
The fallout was immediate. After the shouting, the slammed doors, and the thinly veiled threats of a premature departure, the farmhouse descended into a silence so sharp it could slice bread. Frank retreated to the barn with Scout trailing behind, as if the dog, too, understood his owner needed distance. Martha, ever the bridge between worlds, stood in the doorway of the attic that evening with folded arms and a look that spoke louder than words. "You two owe your grandfather an apology," she said to Lily and Alex. Her tone was calm but firm, in the way only grandmothers could master. Gentle enough to cushion the blow, direct enough to draw blood. Lily was perched on the windowsill, legs crossed, staring out into the dimming horizon. Alex lay flat on the floor with earbuds in, pretending not to hear. Martha wasn't fooled. "Your mother called," she added. "She heard about everything." Alex sat up instantly. "What? How?" "Because I told her," Martha said. "Because it was getting out of hand." "Of course she takes his side." Lily rolled her eyes. "She's not taking sides," Martha said, "but she is taking responsibility. She told me to tell you two that this isn't about Frank being right or wrong. It's about understanding that sometimes we all fail to show up for the people we love, even parents, even children. And sometimes we don't realize it until too late." The room went quiet. "And she asked," she said, softer now, "that you apologize, not for him, but for yourselves. So this summer isn't a waste." She didn't wait for an answer. The next morning, before the sun had burned through the mist clinging to the hills, Lily and Alex were up and dressed. "We'd like to go into town," Lily said over breakfast, staring at her toast like it owed her something. Frank barely looked up from his coffee. "You need a ride?" "We'll go with Grandma," Alex answered. Martha, catching the tension still hovering in the air like humidity, smiled. "I was planning to run errands anyway." The three of them loaded into the Subaru, leaving Frank behind with his paper, his silence, and Scout curled at his feet. The town of Willow Creek wasn't big. It had one main street with a bookstore, a bakery, a diner that still served milkshakes in metal cups, and a pizza shop that smelled like heaven. Compared to the suffocating isolation of the farm, it felt like civilization had finally remembered to knock. Inside the general store, Lily wandered toward the summer hats. She ran her fingers along the brim of a wide-brimmed straw one, then pulled it down over her head, eyeing herself in the mirror with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "That one's nice," Martha said, appearing beside her. I'm sorry for yesterday, for being rude and ungrateful." Martha didn't say anything right away. Instead, she reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind Lily's ear. "Apology accepted, honey. You're not the only one with things to work through." "I thought maybe you could have it," Lily said, pulling the hat off and handing it to her. Martha smiled, genuinely moved. "It'll look better on you." Meanwhile, Alex had found the bookstore and was now leafing through a thick science fiction novel. He looked up when he heard giggling. 2 girls stood by the window display, eyeing him with playful curiosity. "Local celebrity already?" Martha teased as she approached. Alex turned pink. "I guess Vermont's low on teenage boys who aren't glued detractors? Go introduce yourself." "Nope. I'll tell your grandpa you were too scared to talk to girls." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Blackmail, Grandma?" She winked. "A gentle push." Back outside, Lily was deep in conversation with a boy standing behind the counter at the pizza shop. He had tousled brown hair, tanned arms, and the kind of smile that made people forget what they were saying. His name was Sean. When Alex caught up with her, he gave his sister a knowing look. "We're here one day and you've already got a local crush?" She offered free pizza. "Dangerous game." She shrugged. "Tastes like independence." The drive back home was filled with quiet smiles, a shared bag of kettle corn, and the kind of peace that settles in after a storm. That night, Lily sat beside Martha on the porch swing while the crickets resumed their nightly orchestra. "Did you and Grandpa ever fight?" she asked. Martha chuckled. "We still do." "But how are you still together?" Martha leaned back, her eyes lost in the stars above. "Because love doesn't mean never fighting. It means finding your way back after the storm. Frank and I, we were wild once. Did I ever tell you he took me across 44 states on a motorcycle?" Lily sat up, startled. "Seriously?" Martha smiled wistfully. "I still have the photos. Want to see?" She disappeared into the house and returned with an old box, the cardboard edges frayed with time. Inside were black and white snapshots, a younger, freer Frank with shoulder-length hair and a leather jacket, arms around a laughing Martha who wore sunglasses and flowers in her braids. Lily gasped. "He looked cool." "He was," Martha said. "Still is, somewhere under all that grump." The next day, the shift continued. Theo, ever the curious one, wandered out to the fields and found Frank watering the garden. He hovered nearby, watching, then slowly stepped closer. "You want to help?" Frank asked without turning. "Naughty." "Watch that hose. When the water reaches the end of the row, tell me." A few minutes passed. "Now," Theo said. "Good. Now move the hose to the next bed." By the time the sun was high, they were knee-deep in tomato plants, sticky with sweat and soil. Later that afternoon, Frank took Theo to the chicken coop, showed him how to gather eggs, and then to the rabbit hutch, where he let the boy pet soft fur with awe. Frank even cracked a smile. Martha approached with a mischievous glint in her eye. "They're hosting the annual Cattle Run Festival in town tonight." Frank grimaced. "Sounds like hell." "Could we go, please?" And something, perhaps the tiny, hopeful grip of a child, softened him. "We'll go," he said. At the festival, kids laughed, cows thundered through hay-lined streets, and Lily spun in a circle beneath fairy lights. Sean appeared beside her, offering a dance. She hesitated, then accepted. "Grandpa!" Theo shouted, running up. "Come see!" And Frank, who had hung back, squinting under the streetlights, walked forward. And then, without hesitation, he reached for Lily's wrist and gently pulled her back from the dance floor. "What the hell, Grandpa?" she barked. "I just want you safe."
I was dancing. You barely know the kid. So what? You ruin everything. I was finally having fun. Frank's voice rose. Do you think I enjoy being the bad guy? You don't know me, Lily snapped. You're not my dad. You're barely even my grandfather. You've never done a thing for us. That last sentence landed like a hammer. The crowd fell silent. Lily turned, grabbed Sean's hand, and stormed off into the night. Frank didn't follow. Martha found him sitting alone on the porch hours later, a glass of bourbon untouched. I screwed up, he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to.
Lily didn't come home that night. The house felt off balance without her. Too quiet in some corners, too heavy in others. Frank sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the worn wood, fingers folded beneath his chin. The bourbon from the festival still sat untouched, the glass fogged and forgotten. Outside, the Vermont night had curled into a thick hush. Not even the crickets dared chirp. Martha paced the porch, phone clutched in her hand, her voice low and urgent in the dark. Lily, sweetheart, call me back, please. Just let us know you're safe. When the phone finally buzzed, Martha nearly dropped it. She answered with breath caught in her throat. Lily? Hi, Grandma, came the voice on the other end, faint but steady. I'm with Sean. Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Where are you? We're just outside town. I'm fine. I just need space. Lily, honey, your mother. I'll call her, she said quickly. I promise. Martha hesitated. Are you sure about this boy? There was a pause. Yeah, she said, a little too fast. He gets me. Martha knew that tone. Knew it in her bones, the one that sounded like belief but felt like escape. The next morning she told Frank. He didn't speak, didn't argue. He just stood in the doorway, shoulders squared, eyes staring at a spot on the floor that hadn't moved in 30 years. And when he finally looked up, the storm had already gathered in his chest. I did this, he muttered. I lost her. She'll be back, Martha said gently. But you need to change what she comes back to. Frank didn't answer. But later that day, he went to the doctor. He'd never liked doctors. Too many questions, too much waiting. But when the nurse asked if he smoked or drank, Frank said, not anymore, before the question had even landed. The physician recommended exercise, sunlight, routine. If you're serious about quitting, you'll need something else to fill the hole. Frank walked out with a prescription for multivitamins and a list of senior fitness classes he'd never attend. But he also had something else, a sense of responsibility pressing against his ribs like a second heartbeat. Back at the farm, Alex waited with a quiet curiosity. He watched his grandfather return from town, noticed the absence of the usual paper bag with liquor peeking out. You good? He asked. Frank nodded once. Want to take a ride? That afternoon, the two of them suited up and took the old mountain bikes out. The trail behind the olive grove was rugged and dusty, but scenic, threading through tall grass, wildflowers, and stone fences worn down by time. Scout loped behind them, tongue flapping like a flag. They pedaled in silence at first, the air broken only by the crunch of gravel under tires and the occasional bleat of sheep in a nearby field. It was the kind of silence that felt earned. You know, Alex said eventually, you're not as impossible as you pretend to be. Frank grunted. Don't get used to it. Meanwhile, Lily's fairy tale was beginning to warp at the edges. The morning sun found her and Sean on horseback, trotting through a golden meadow that smelled like honeysuckle and pine. Sean had brought a blanket, a basket with sandwiches, and a bottle of something fizzy and pink. He made her laugh. He quoted indie films. He said he hated Instagram and big government. He said she was different.
but something in his smile had started to feel performative, like a stage light that never quite turned off. Later that day, as they lay on the sand of an isolated riverside clearing, Sean reached into his satchel and pulled out a small vial. It glittered in the sun like a shard of danger. Lily sat up. "What's that?" "Just something to help you feel more free." She hesitated. He smiled. "I do it all the time. You'll love it." Back at the farm, Frank was halfway through pruning a row of ogland olive trees when an old friend, Nate Cooper, leather-skinned and full of winded stories, pulled up in his dusty pickup. "You hear about Sean?" Nate said, hopping out with 2 coffees and a paper bag of bear claws. I wiped his brow. "He's dating my granddaughter." Nate paused, the silence going brittle. "You're serious?" Frank's stomach dropped. Nate sighed, lowering his voice. "That kid? He ain't what he pretends to be. That pizza shop is a front, Frank. He's been caught running edibles, maybe more." Frank froze. Nate leaned in. "Talking narcotics, too? Real quiet, real slick, but bad news." Frank didn't even take the coffee. He turned, went straight to the garage and yanked the tarp off his old Ford Bronco. The thing hadn't run in months, but he didn't care. With a few cusses, a wrench twist, and a jolt from a spare battery, the engine roared like a war drum. Alex appeared in the doorway, startled. "What's going on?" "Need your phone." "What?" "Track your sister." Alex blinked. "You're kidding." Frank's face was hard. "Now." Alex handed it over, pulled up the app they'd used to keep tabs on each other during the trip to Vermont. A blinking blue dot. Outside town, near a river. Frank grabbed his old hunting rifle, tucked it behind the seat. "Whoa, Grandpa, what the hell?" "Stay here." The Bronco peeled out in a cloud of dust, the tires screaming their own panic into the afternoon air. He tore through the hills like a man possessed, the road a blur of green and gravel, and his hands clenched on the wheel like it was the only thing tethering him to reason. He reached the clearing just as the sun began to dip. Sean stood beside the campfire, shirt half unbuttoned, barefoot in the sand. Lily was lying nearby, motionless, her breath shallow, her lips tinged with something unnatural. Frank didn't even wait. He stormed out of the truck, rifle slung low, voice thundering. "Where is she?" Sean jumped, palms raised. "Whoa, chill, man. She's fine. She's fine. I didn't give her much. Just a little—" Frank's voice turned ice. "What did you give her?" "It's just a hallucinogen. Microdose. I swear she's safe." "You're done." I didn't mean—" "Get in your car," Frank growled. "Drive, and don't ever let me see your face again." Sean hesitated. Frank raised the rifle. "Now." Sean stumbled backward, grabbed his bag, and vanished down the path like a rat flushed from cover. Frank dropped the weapon, ran to Lily, knelt beside her. "Lily, sweetheart, you're safe. I've got you." Her eyelids fluttered, her skin clammy under his hand. He carried her to the truck like she weighed nothing and drove like hell back to the farm. Martha met them at the porch with panic in her face. They called the doctor, who came rushing with IV bags and reassurances. By midnight, Lily was stable, resting in her old bedroom. Frank stood outside her door, head pressed to the frame. "I could have lost her," he whispered. Martha touched his arm. "But you didn't." He shook his head. "It's not enough to protect her. I need to understand her." "You're trying," she said. "That's what counts." Still, Frank didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat by the window, eyes fixed on the stars, waiting for the light to change, inside the house and inside himself.
Lily recovered slowly. For 2 days, she remained pale and quiet. The spark in her usually defiant eyes dimmed to a cautious glow. She didn't talk much, didn't eat much either. She just sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket even though the Vermont sun was warm, staring out at the hills as if they might somehow offer an answer she couldn't find elsewhere. Frank didn't push. He didn't lecture. He didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, he picked peaches from the tree, one by one, and left them in a bowl beside her. And every morning, one would be gone. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Theo, being the small force of sunshine that he was, would occasionally crawl up beside her with a picture book or a rock he'd found shaped like a turtle, and Lily would smile faintly, brushing his hair back without saying a word. By the third morning, she asked, "Is Sean coming back?" Frank, who was on the porch hammering a broken railing, paused mid-swing. His voice was quiet. "No, he's not." Lily nodded, swallowing hard. "I scared him off, didn't I?" she asked, her tone a mix of irony and regret. Frank set down the hammer, walked over and sat in the chair across from her. "You scared him off by being better than him," he said. "All I did was make it obvious." She let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sob. "I was so sure he was different." Frank looked at her gently. "You still believe love's supposed to come easy, don't you? Doesn't it?" "No, not the kind that lasts." That night, as the house settled into the hush of twilight, Frank found Alex sitting alone under the pergola that led to the olive grove. He was fiddling with an old camera, the kind with film and a stubborn winding gear. Frank eased down beside him. "That's yours?" Alex nodded. "Found it in a thrift store before we came. I like how it slows things down. You only get 36 chances to get it right." Frank smiled faintly. "That's how love works too." Alex snorted. "You been reading self-help books?" Frank shook his head. "No, just watching you kids try to outrun everything." A silence passed between them, easy now. Frank pointed toward the grove. "Want to see where I've buried half my soul?" Alex raised a brow. "Sounds haunting. Let's do it." They walked side by side through rows of olive trees, the leaves shimmering in silver waves under the moonlight. Frank moved slower now, not from age, but from a strange reverence, like he was walking through a chapel instead of an orchard. "These are grossenet," he said, brushing his hand across a branch. "Delicate oil, floral, sweet. That one there, Aglandau, makes stronger stuff. Peppery, more kick. You name your trees? I know them like people. Some give you everything without asking. Some are stingy. Some bear fruit only when they're dying." He stopped at a particularly thick-trunked tree. "This one was planted the year Eleanor left. I worked that summer so hard I didn't have energy left to cry." Alex looked up, surprised. "You cried?" Frank gave him a sidelong look. "Don't spread it around." They sat on two overturned buckets near the base of the tree. Frank picked up a clump of dry soil and let it fall between his fingers. "I told your mom everything," he said. Alex blinked. "When?" "Years ago. About my mistakes, about her mother, her childhood, about what I regretted, what I didn't. I told her I wanted to do better, but wanting it doesn't always make it happen." Alex stared at him. "And then she cut you off?" "She said nothing, then left. Years passed, and I assumed silence meant punishment, but maybe it meant she was lost too." A breeze passed between the trees, carrying the soft rustle of branches. Frank leaned back. "Your mom's gonna need you soon." Alex frowned. "What do you mean?" "She'll need strength, from someone steady, after the divorce, after this summer." Alex picked at the hem of his sleeve. "I'm not ready to be someone's rock." "You are already," he said. "Just haven't realized it yet." The following day, Frank stayed in the grove long after sunrise, pruning with an almost meditative stillness. At the edge of the property, Martha appeared holding a letter. A package came, she said, her voice bright but her hands trembling slightly. Frank took the envelope. It bore the seal of the Vermont olive oil competition. He hesitated. "Read it," Martha said, nudging him.
He unfolded the letter with the cautious reverence of a man checking test results for a disease. His eyes scanned the words, then stopped. "You won," Martha whispered, recognizing the change in his breath before he even said it. I won." A golden sticker gleamed at the corner of the paper. First place, best cold-pressed olive oil, small farm category. Martha clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes watering. "Frank, after all these years." Frank looked around, at the trees, at the soil still clinging to his boots, at the little yellow bucket Theo had left behind, and for the first time in a long, long while, his heart swelled with something that wasn't grief or guilt. He held the letter high and bellowed toward the grove, "You hear that, girls? We did it!" Theo, having followed the shouting, ran toward him. "What happened?" He scooped him up, twirling once despite the ache in his back. "We got a medal, kiddo! We won first place!" Theo laughed. "Did the trees win too?" "They sure did." Later that evening, the house was full of noise. Neighbors trickled in bearing pies, cider, and congratulations. The living room glowed with string lights and soft music from Martha's old stereo. For once, the walls felt wide enough to hold everyone's joy. Frank stood at the center, a glass of sparkling apple juice in hand. He looked at his grandchildren, huddled together by the window. "Have you told Eleanor yet?" he asked Martha. She shook her head. "Time zones, she's probably asleep." Frank nodded, a flicker of disappointment passing over his face. Lily caught that, and when she turned away to grab another drink, she stopped mid-step. Sean was there. Across the lawn, near the gate. Dressed well, but out of place, smiling like nothing had ever gone wrong. Frank saw him next. He moved fast, glass down, sleeves rolled, but Lily stepped forward, hand up. "I'll handle it," she said. Frank hesitated, then nodded. Lily walked across the grass, her steps measured. Sean's smile faltered as she neared. "Hey, I wanted to—" "No, you don't get to talk." "I didn't mean to." "You meant to get what you wanted, and you didn't care who you hurt." His mouth opened, closed. Lily tilted her head. "Next time you hand someone a chemical, maybe ask if they trust you first." Then she turned, walked away. Sean didn't follow. Back inside, Frank poured himself another glass of juice. He raised it in Lily's direction. "To the girl who finally saw through a ghost." She raised hers back. "To the man who scared it off." The music swelled, the room pulsed with laughter, with stories, with the magic of earned peace. Outside, the olive trees swayed gently in the wind, silent witnesses to a summer slowly starting to heal.
The morning after the party, the farmhouse was steeped in a kind of quiet that felt earned, not awkward. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and leftover cider. The screen door creaked gently with the breeze, and the birds outside chirped as if nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. But Frank's gaze lingered on the driveway, empty now, except for his old Bronco and a few tire tracks still etched into the dirt. "Sean's gone for good," he muttered under his breath, more to reassure himself than anyone else. Lily didn't bring him up. She barely spoke at all, but there was something different in the way she moved now, slower, steadier, like a fuse had burned low and left a different kind of fire in its place. Not the kind that raged, the kind that simmered. Frank watched her from the porch as she helped Martha hang laundry, then wandered out to the pasture to sit beside Theo while he played in the dirt with a stick and a trail of ants. Later that afternoon, Frank invited Alex to join him in the grove again. "Not to work," he clarified. "Just walk." Alex followed without question. That in itself was new. They meandered through the rows in silence. The leaves shivered in the breeze, casting dancing shadows across the ground. "I didn't expect to like it here," Alex said eventually. Frank looked sideways at him. "Do you?" Alex nodded. "It's slower, but clearer.
Frank smiled. Clearer is underrated. When they returned to the house, Martha handed Frank a letter. No return address, just your name. Frank frowned and opened it with stiff fingers. The handwriting inside was tight and familiar, a woman's script. Dad, I don't know why I'm writing now. Maybe because I heard about the award. Maybe because I saw a picture of Lily standing beside your olive grove, smiling in a way I haven't seen in years. I don't know. I guess I just needed to say, I never stopped wondering what it would have been like if I'd stayed, or if you'd come after me. I was angry for a long time. Maybe I still am, but I'm also tired. I've made mistakes. I've hurt people, especially my kids, and I think I maybe inherited that from you. But I see you're trying, so maybe I can try too. If you still keep my old room, maybe one day I'll come back to it. Eleanor. Frank sat down on the edge of the porch and read the letter twice, then a third time. His hands trembled slightly as he folded it and slid it into his shirt pocket like it might disappear if left unattended. She wrote, he whispered. Martha, watching from the kitchen, blinked hard to keep her tears from falling into the biscuit dough. The next few days passed with a quiet sort of beauty. The children had, by some invisible agreement, stopped arguing. They fell into a rhythm: slow breakfasts, afternoon chores, evenings filled with card games, fireflies, and stories under the stars. Theo, never far from Frank's side, had become his shadow. The little boy followed him to the henhouse, helped collect eggs, and even named the fattest chicken Mrs. Governor. But in the olive grove, their bond deepened. Want to learn to water the trees properly? Frank asked one morning. Theo beamed. Yes, please. Frank showed him the irrigation hose, how to check when the water reached the root zone and where to move the line. Watch that end. When the water gets there, holler. Theo watched with seriousness rare for his age. Then he called out, It's there! Frank nodded. Now take the hose to the next row. The boy obeyed quickly, hands barely able to manage the weight of the tubing. You're stronger than you look, Frank said. I eat peaches, Thea replied matter-of-factly. Frank laughed, really laughed, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in years. That evening, Frank was in the barn fixing a busted tool when Martha came to the doorway. They're having a cattle release in town tomorrow, she said. It's a big deal. I thought Theo might like it. Frank wiped sweat from his brow. Town events aren't exactly my thing. Martha stepped closer. He wants you to go. Frank paused. She didn't push. But that night, Theo appeared in his room, barefoot and clutching his favorite storybook. Grandpa? He asked softly. Yeah? Will you go with me tomorrow to the cattle thing? Frank's answer came before he had time to doubt it. Yeah, kid, I will. The next morning they dressed early. Theo wore a denim jacket and his lucky boots. Frank pulled out his old hat, the one that hadn't seen daylight in a decade, and dusted it off like armor. They arrived in town just as the first cows were being herded into the main street. Spectators lined the sidewalks with cameras and cups of lemonade. Laughter mingled with the lowing of cattle and the jingle of spurs. Frank hoisted Theo onto his shoulders, and the boy squealed in delight. There they go! He shouted, pointing as the first group of steers was released, thundering down the hay-strewn road. Frank laughed with him, the vibration of joy echoing through his chest. The moment didn't last. Across the crowd, Lily stood near the edge of the town square, wearing a puffy lavender blouse, a short skirt, and a bold lip color that didn't belong in any small-town parade. At her side, unbelievably, stood Sean. Frank froze. He didn't hear the next round of cattle. Didn't hear Theo asking to be lifted higher. He just saw red. He stormed across the street, cutting through the crowd, each step heavier than the last. Lily turned as he approached. "Are you serious?" he growled. "Don't start," she said. "You brought him here after everything? I don't need your permission. Look at what you're wearing. You think that's appropriate?" "I like how I look." "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," she snapped, voice rising. "You're the embarrassment. You act like you're some kind of saint, but you're just bitter, controlling, angry. I'm your grandfather. You've never acted like it." The shouting escalated. Sean tried to intervene. Frank shoved him away. And then he slapped her. The world seemed to stop. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Lily's hand flew to her cheek. Her eyes filled with tears, then rage. She turned and walked away, this time with no hesitation, Sean trailing behind. Frank stood in the middle of the square, chest heaving, hands shaking, surrounded by faces he no longer recognized. He had just broken something that might never be fixed. Back home, Martha waited on the porch, the tension in her shoulders betraying what she already suspected. "Where is she?" she asked. "She left." "With him?" He nodded. Martha turned her face toward the yard, blinking furiously. "You promised me," she whispered. "I know. You said you'd protect them." "I thought I was." The silence between them was no longer soft. It was heavy. It was grief. That night, Lily called. Martha answered on the first ring. "Lily?" "I'm okay," she said, her voice flat. "Where are you?" "With Sean." "Are you sure?" "I'll call Mom. Tell her I'm with him, that I'm safe." Martha's voice cracked. "Honey, please, are you sure he's the right one?" Lily didn't answer. Then, "I just need time." The line went dead. And as the house swallowed the quiet once again, Frank stood at the sink with the letter from Eleanor pressed to his chest. He hadn't just failed his daughter. He was failing her children, too.
The next morning, the Whitmore farmhouse felt like it was holding its breath. Frank sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the rim of his coffee mug as if it might answer for him. The coffee had gone cold. So had the room. Outside, the wind combed gently through the trees, but inside him, it howled. "She's gone," Martha said, finally, setting a folded dish towel on the counter. "And you hit her." Frank didn't flinch. "She needed protection," he murmured. "But You hurt her," Martha said, not unkindly, but not softly either. "There's a difference." He looked up at her, eyes hollow. "I never wanted to become the kind of man they run from." Martha stepped closer. "Then stop standing still." She placed a worn pamphlet on the table. At the top, in bold serif font, it read, "How to Stop Drinking, First Steps Toward a Sober Life." Frank stared at it like it had just slapped him too. "I'm not an alcoholic," he muttered, defensive out of habit. "You're something, and it's hurting you. It's hurting all of us." He didn't argue. He couldn't, not after what he'd done. That day, Frank drove to the health center in town and signed up for a recovery group. The receptionist, a tired woman with kind eyes and nicotine-stained fingers, handed him a clipboard and didn't ask questions. That was mercy. He filled in the blanks: name, age, habits, regrets. By the time he left, he had a list of exercises to do, a phone number for a sponsor named Jim, and a small blue booklet that read, "One day at a time." That night, Frank didn't drink. Instead, he laced up a pair of dusty sneakers and walked laps around the field behind the barn. Theo followed, trying to match his grandfather's stride with child-sized determination. "You running from something?" Theo asked innocently. Frank chuckled, trying to catch up to something.
After 2 laps, they lay on their backs in the grass, panting. "Grandpa? Yeah? Are you sad?" Frank looked at the stars overhead. So many, so bright, so silent. "Yeah, kid. I think I am." Theo thought about that. It's okay to cry, you know. Frank reached over and gently ruffled his hair. "You're a wise little guy, you know that?" Theo grinned. The next morning, Alex joined them for the walk. Then the next. By the 3rd day, Frank had stopped checking the liquor cabinet entirely. Martha smiled as she watched them through the kitchen window. Healing, it seemed, was contagious. But Lily, she was still gone. There were no calls, no texts, just absence, thick and aching like a wound that wouldn't close. Then came the news. It was Nate again, Frank's old friend and the town's unofficial oracle. He showed up on the porch, cap in hand, brows drawn tight. "I heard something," he said. Frank set down his pruning shears. "What now?" "Sean's involved with something darker than we thought. Not just weed or pills. Something worse. Might be federal." Frank felt the ground shift beneath him. "And Lily?" Nate shook his head. "No one's seen her since the festival, but someone spotted his car heading toward the Ridge Trail. Secluded cabins up there, no cell reception, no neighbors for miles." Frank didn't wait. He grabbed his keys, his jacket, and a map. Alex was already at the door. "I'm coming with you," the boy said. Frank opened his mouth to argue, then saw the resolve in Alex's eyes and nodded once. "Get in." They drove in silence, the road winding tighter with every mile. Pine needles whispered across the windshield as the forest thickened. The sun dipped low behind the hills, and the sky turned the color of bruises. They reached the ridge trailhead just as the last of the light began to fade. Frank looked at the Bronco's dashboard. The old GPS screen flickered uselessly. "We walk from here." Alex hesitated. "What if she doesn't want to come back?" Frank stopped, looked at his grandson. "I don't care what she wants. I care what she needs." They hiked through uneven terrain, past old hunting cabins and forgotten trails. Frank's breath grew labored, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Finally, in the clearing ahead, they spotted a flicker of firelight. Sean's truck sat crooked beneath the trees. A cooler was tipped over near the fire pit. Music drifted faintly from a battery-powered speaker. Frank held up his hand and motioned for Alex to stay back. He approached slowly, boots crunching gravel. Sean looked up, startled, a beer can in hand. Frank's voice cut like steel. "Where is she?" Sean stood. "Man, I told you." Frank closed the distance in 2 strides and shoved him. "Where is she?" Sean stumbled back, but held his ground. "She's inside. She's fine. You can ask her yourself." Frank pushed past him and flung open the cabin door. Lily sat on the edge of a couch, arms folded, eyes rimmed with red. She didn't look surprised to see him. "I knew you'd come," she said. Frank took a breath. "You all right?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I'm done pretending I'm happy." He crouched down in front of her. "You don't have to come home for me, but come home for you." Lily blinked, lips trembling. "I'm scared." "So am I. But I'd rather face that fear than lose you." Outside, Sean hovered, clearly uncomfortable. Lily stood and walked past him without a word. Frank followed, pausing only to look Sean in the eye. "You ever show your face near my family again, you'll regret it." Sean scoffed. "Is that a threat?" "No. It's a promise." They left him in the clearing, swallowed by trees and cowardice. The walk back was quiet, but no longer heavy. At the truck, Lily turned to Alex. "You tracked me?" He shrugged. "It wasn't hard. You're not great at disappearing." She laughed. For the first time in days, she laughed. Back home, Martha opened the front door before they even knocked. Lily ran into her arms. Frank stood at the edge of the porch, watching, letting the warmth soak into the cracks he didn't know were there. That night, Lily knocked on Frank's bedroom door. "Can we talk?" He nodded. She sat on the edge of the bed. "When you hit me, I felt like a little kid again, like all the yelling between you and Mom had never stopped." "There's no excuse." "I know, but you also came after me. That means something too." He blinked at her. "I forgive you," she said. Frank reached for her hand and, without a word, held it in both of his. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to.
The day after Lily returned, the house felt lighter. Not entirely healed. Too many things had been said, too many lines crossed for it to be that simple. But lighter, like the shutters had been opened after a long, brutal winter. The air moved differently. The silence didn't bite. And Frank, for the first time in a long time, woke without dread pressing against his chest. The morning began like any other. Coffee, the sound of Theo running down the stairs in his two big socks, Martha humming in the kitchen while flipping pancakes. Her rhythm returned. Lily entered barefoot, hair tied up in a messy knot, wearing an old flannel shirt she'd borrowed from the laundry line. She looked home. "Coffee?" Martha offered. Lily nodded. "Please." Frank watched from the corner of the room, trying not to stare too long. Later that morning, he found her out by the dock near the lake, tossing small stones into the water. He approached slowly. "That your new hobby?" She didn't turn. "Calming." Frank sat beside her on the wooden bench, the lake shimmering in the soft August light. "I used to think still water meant nothing was happening, but it's where the deep stuff is, the quiet places." Lily threw another pebble. "I didn't expect you to come for me, after everything." "I didn't expect you to come back," he replied. "We're even." She glanced at him. "Are we?" Frank's face softened. "No, but we're getting there." They sat in silence a while longer, the kind of silence that doesn't need fixing. As summer pushed into its final weeks, a rhythm returned. Alex helped Frank oil the tools in the barn. Lily volunteered to repaint the old shed. Even Theo had taken to inspecting the olive trees with a clipboard made from cardboard and duct tape. The days blurred into golden afternoons. Time, it seemed, was finally on their side. Until it wasn't. It was a Tuesday morning when Frank received the envelope. It came in the mail with the usual stack of seed catalogs, utility bills, and Martha's copy of Gardener's Monthly. But this one was different. White, official, and stamped with the seal of the Vermont Department of Agriculture. He opened it at the kitchen table. His eyes scanned the page once, then twice. The color drained from his face. "What is it?" Martha asked. He didn't answer, just handed her the letter. Martha read it silently, lips tightening. It was a notification of land reassessment. A local developer had challenged the land property lines on the East Orchard, the one that bordered the highway. The state had reviewed it, and based on the maps, they were siding with the developer. "They want our land?" Martha said, voice low. "Just that stretch behind the grove, but it includes the oldest trees and the well." Martha looked up, stunned. But Frank, that's your legacy." "No," he said firmly. "That's our legacy, which means we fight for it." That night, Frank sat down with Alex at the dining room table and spread out old blueprints, land records, even faded receipts from when he first bought the grove. "You're good with tech," Frank said. "Think you can help me prove they're wrong?" Alex looked at the mess of papers. "I can try, but we'll need satellite maps, soil records, GIS overlays." Frank blinked. "What do you need?" Alex grinned. "Don't worry, you've got Gen Z on your side." Over the next few days, the dining table became a command center. Frank's worn maps overlapped with Alex's printed Google Earth images. Lily helped scan documents. Martha called a retired lawyer friend in Burlington. Even Theo chipped in, making protest signs with crayons just in case. It wasn't just about land anymore. It was about belonging.
"You know," Alex said one evening, eyes glued to his laptop, "this whole thing is kind of like you." Frank raised an eyebrow. "A zoning dispute?" "No," Alex said, smiling. "Old, stubborn, rooted, but still here." Frank chuckled. "Careful, or I'll make you dig post holes tomorrow." "You already did," he muttered, rubbing his back. Meanwhile, Lily was changing in quieter ways. She no longer wore the sharp armor of sarcasm or rebellion. She dressed simply, spoke carefully, helped without being asked. But her eyes had a softness Frank hadn't seen since the day she arrived. One evening, she asked Martha, "Did you always love him?" Martha smiled, peeling apples for pie. "No. At first, I only remembered someone else when I looked at him." "Someone else?" "My fiancé. He passed away just before I met Frank. We were just kids when we got together. Lost kids, trying to remember someone else by being near each other." Lily leaned in. "So, how did you fall in love with him?" Her hands didn't pause. "By staying." Lily held those words close all night. The next morning, she knocked on Frank's door. "Can we go somewhere?" "Sure," he said. "Where?" "The lake." He took her to a smaller one, a hidden place only locals knew. The water was still, the air smelled of pine and stone and sunlight. Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out a weathered silver coin. "What's that?" "Something your grandmother gave me once. She said if I ever really wanted something, peace, forgiveness, hope, I should toss it into the lake." "Did you?" He nodded. "But it took me 20 years to figure out what I'd wished for." He handed it to her. She turned it over in her palm. "Does it work?" "Only if you mean it." She looked out across the water, thought for a long time. Then she tossed the coin. It arced through the air, flashed once in the sun, and vanished beneath the surface with a sound so small it barely broke the silence. "What did you wish for?" She didn't answer, but her eyes shimmered with something brighter than tears. When they returned home, a letter was waiting on the front porch bench, handwritten, from Eleanor. Frank opened it with trembling hands. "Dad, I heard about the land situation. I'm sorry. I know how much that place means to you. I was thinking, maybe I could come up for a few days. Help out. The kids say you've changed. I'd like to see that for myself. If the room's still open." E. Frank handed the letter to Martha. She read it, then looked up at him with that same look she gave him when he first proposed, surprised, hopeful, and slightly amused. "She's coming home," she whispered. Frank blinked hard, then smiled. "I told you, the room's always been hers." He stepped outside to where the kids were sitting on the porch steps watching fireflies. "She's coming," he said. Lily looked up. "Mom?" Frank nodded. "Should I move out of her room?" "No," he said. "She'll want to see it lived in." Alex nudged her. "Told you he was a softie." Frank shook his head. "I'm just getting old." "Better than being dead," Alex said. Theo looked confused. "You're not dying, are you?" Frank smiled and pulled him into a hug. "Not if I can help it." That night, the stars above the farmhouse looked sharper than usual. And inside, one room, long closed by absence, was left wide open, with the lamp on, waiting.
Eleanor arrived on a Thursday morning. The train pulled into Willow Creek Station with a long sigh of brakes, as if it too understood the weight of returning. She stepped off slowly, 1 foot at a time, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses too large for her narrow face. Lily spotted her first. "There," she whispered to Frank. Frank didn't move. From a distance, Eleanor looked almost unchanged. Same straight posture, same long stride. But as she drew closer, Frank could see the lines around her mouth had deepened. The color in her hair was touched with gray. and her eyes, when she removed her glasses, held something he hadn't seen since she was a girl: uncertainty. They stood 5 feet apart. Neither spoke. Then Eleanor's voice broke the quiet. "Hi, Dad." Frank's reply came from some place deeper than words. "Hi, kid." It was enough. Lily rushed forward, throwing her arms around her mother. Eleanor held her tight, breathing in her daughter's hair like she was trying to fill in every blank page from the last 17 years. Alex stepped forward, offering a half smile. "Hey, Mom." Eleanor's voice caught. "Hi, sweetheart." Then Theo barreled forward, nearly tackling her knees. Are you going to stay forever?" She laughed, wiping her eyes. "Not forever, baby, but long enough." Back at the house, Martha had gone full grandmother mode. Fresh bread rising in the oven, lemonade sweating in tall glasses, the guest room freshly made with crisp white sheets. "You've already got everything perfect," Eleanor said. Martha smiled. "You think I'd let you come home to anything less?" That afternoon, the family gathered beneath the pergola outside. The grapevines overhead filtered the sunlight into soft, swaying patterns. Frank sat at the head of the picnic table, Eleanor across from him. The air between them still carried the tension of things unsaid, but it was no longer suffocating. They began talking in small, safe circles. "How's your law practice?" Frank asked. "I closed it last year. Burnout." "You were good at it." "I was good at pretending I liked it." "I know a little something about pretending." Later that evening, Lily pulled Eleanor aside into the grove. "You okay?" Lily asked. Eleanor looked up at the olive trees. "I never thought I'd stand under these again." "They missed you." Eleanor turned to her. "You know, I blamed him for everything. The silence, the distance, even the way I raised you. But I think I just didn't know how to forgive." Lily reached down and picked up an olive. "Mom, you don't have to forgive all at once." Eleanor smiled. "You get that from me?" Lily shook her head. "From Grandpa, actually." The next few days passed like scenes from a film they didn't know they were making. Eleanor helped Alex finalize the research for the land dispute. Together, they built a digital map overlay showing the East Orchard's original boundaries. Alex submitted it to the county office with Frank's signature. "I don't know if it'll work," Alex admitted, "but it's solid." Frank clapped his shoulder. "Good enough for me." Lily repainted the old kitchen cabinets, this time in soft sage green. Martha beamed every time she walked in. And Theo, sweet Theo, started writing a book about the summer. He called it The House That Had No Wi-Fi, but Lots of Trees. One morning, just after sunrise, Frank walked down to the grove alone. The air was cool, the light just beginning to seep through the branches. He ran his fingers over the bark of the oldest tree, then knelt and pressed his palm into the soil. That's when he saw it. A small wooden stake, freshly planted near the grove's edge. Tied to it was a strip of surveyor's tape, red, fluttering like a flag of surrender. Frank stood, eyes narrowing. He followed the line, stakes every few yards, all in a perfect line. His line. The developer had moved in quietly, staking the claim while the county deliberated. It was legal, premature, and deeply personal. Frank stormed back to the house. "They're already marking the grove," Frank told Eleanor and Alex. Didn't even wait for the ruling. Eleanor stood. "We can send a cease and desist." Frank's voice shook. "They want to rip up the trees. They want to tear out my life. Then we make them fight for every inch." Frank stared at her. "You really mean that?" "I do."
That evening, the town held its monthly community board meeting at the library. Frank hadn't attended one in years. But that night, he stood at the podium, hands weathered but steady, voice clear. They say we're just clinging to old dirt. But this land, this grove, it raised my children. It healed my grandchildren. It gave me purpose when I didn't deserve it. People murmured in the crowd. Some nodded. I don't own a chain of stores. I don't build condos. But I grow something real. Something that takes decades to bear fruit. And I think that matters. He stepped back. Eleanor rose next. She passed out packets of evidence, boundary maps, planting records, even letters from buyers of the award-winning oil. The grove isn't just personal. It's legally protected under Vermont's Agricultural Heritage Clause. The East Orchard qualifies. The room buzzed. When they left the meeting, Frank exhaled for the first time in days. Whether we win or not, Eleanor said, you stood up. Frank looked at her, his voice soft. So did you. Back at the house, as the stars blinked awake above the trees, the family gathered around a fire pit Frank had built years ago, but rarely used. They roasted marshmallows, sipped cider, and let the silence between them speak in a new language. Peace. Tell us a story, Theo said, curled under a blanket beside Lily. Frank leaned back in his chair, staring into the flames. Once, he began, there was a man who loved the wrong way. Loud, sharp, distant, but he still loved. And somehow that love found its way back to him. Lily reached over and took his hand. Eleanor added quietly, even when he didn't think he deserved it. Frank smiled, and from the grove, under the night sky, a gentle wind moved through the trees like an old friend returning home.
By the time September rolled around, the lavender fields hadn't bloomed. Not that year. A dry spell in early spring had stunted them, and Frank had decided to let them rest rather than force the soil. But something else had bloomed. The house. The people in it. That summer, what had started as a season of resistance turned into a memory none of them wanted to let go of. It had been uninvited, unexpected, unpredictable, and somehow unforgettable. On the morning of their last day, the farmhouse was filled with the quiet hum of motion. Suitcases stood like sentinels near the front door. Alex was packing his laptop and charger. Lily folded clothes into her backpack with practiced efficiency. Even Theo, usually scatterbrained, was gently placing his stuffed animals into a tote bag with unusual care. Frank stood at the top of the stairs, watching it all. He'd always hated goodbyes. Downstairs, Eleanor sipped coffee at the kitchen table, staring out the window. "You sure you don't want to come with us?" she asked, not looking at him. Frank leaned against the doorway. "Provon's still home, Al." She smiled faintly. "Still calling it that, huh?" Frank shrugged. "Old names stick better than paint." "You could visit, see Paris." "Vermont's enough of a trip these days." They shared a soft chuckle, one that came with mutual understanding. Not sadness, just the kind of quiet resignation that comes from knowing who you are. Then Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "What's this?" Frank asked. "The final letter from the county, about the land dispute." He opened it slowly. A gold seal at the bottom. A single word that made his chest tighten. "Dismissed." "They ruled in our favor?" he asked. Eleanor nodded. "Alex's research sealed it, plus a little help from my old firm." Frank swallowed hard. "So, the Grove stays?" She looked him in the eye. "The Grove stands." He folded the paper carefully, like something sacred. "Thank you," he whispered. Martha appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "The car's warmed up." The mood shifted. That invisible pull of departure sank in. Alex came down the stairs wheeling a suitcase. Lily followed, backpacks slung over one shoulder. Theo ran out last, waving a crown drawing in the air. "Look, I made a goodbye picture." Frank bent down to take it. It was a sketch of the farmhouse, slightly lopsided but unmistakably theirs. 5 stick figures stood beneath the sun. One had a hat, one had braids, one had big glasses. Frank pointed. "That me?" Theo giggled. "Obviously." Frank chuckled and tucked the drawing into his shirt pocket. Outside, the sky was a clean blue canvas. The truck was loaded. The kids hugged Martha first, Theo clinging to her like a vine, Alex kissing her cheek, Lily whispering something that made her laugh and tear up at the same time. Then came Frank's turn. Alex stepped up. "Don't be a stranger, okay?" Frank gave him a firm handshake, then pulled him into a one-armed hug. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, kid. Use it." Alex nodded. "Thanks for trusting me." "You earned it." Lily came next. They stood silently for a moment. Then she reached out and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm gonna miss this porch," she said, muffled against his shoulder. Frank held her tight. "It'll miss you back." She pulled away, blinking fast. "Don't burn the olive grove down while we're gone." No promises. Then Theo. The boy stared up at Frank, suddenly serious. "Will the trees remember me?" Frank crouched down. "Every last one." Theo hugged him with all his might. "You're my favorite grown-up." Frank's voice caught. "You're mine too, kid." The car doors slammed shut, one by one. Frank stood beside Martha on the porch as the engine started. He waved until the car disappeared down the hill. Then silence. A warm, bittersweet silence. "They'll be back," Martha said, her hand gently finding his. Frank nodded. "I know." That night, Frank wandered into the room Lily had stayed in. The bed was neatly made. The books she'd stacked on the nightstand were gone, but a single earring lay forgotten on the dresser. He picked it up, rolled it between his fingers. Outside, the trees shifted in the wind, their leaves whispering to one another, like old women in church. He went into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of cider, carried them out to the back porch where Martha waited. They sat side by side, the cicadas singing a slow farewell. Frank raised his glass. "To the summer we didn't choose." Martha clinked hers against his. "And the family we got back." They drank. Then, as the last light dipped behind the trees, Frank took a deep breath and said, "You know, I thought I was planting olives to build something for myself. Turns out I was just making room for them." Martha smiled. "Sometimes love grows in the soil you forget to water." They sat in silence a long while. Then Frank stood and walked down to the grove one last time before bed. He placed Theo's drawing inside a tin box, sealed it, and buried it near the oldest tree. "Just so you don't forget," he whispered. The wind rustled the branches in reply. Up at the house, the porch light glowed warm and steady. And though the lavender hadn't bloomed that year, something far rarer had. A home. A bond. A second chance. A summer that didn't end when the leaves began to turn, but stayed, rooted, real, and impossible to forget.
It wasn't raining when Frank Whitmore stood at the Willow Creek Town Hall a month later, but the sky hung low and heavy, like it had something it wanted to say but couldn't. He adjusted his tie for the 3rd time. Martha reached over and gently fixed the crooked knot. "Stop fidgeting, you look good." Frank gave a nervous half-smile. "Feels like I'm going to prom." She laughed. "You never went to prom." "Exactly," he said, tugging at his collar. Inside the hall, the room was buzzing. Banners hung across the rafters, hand-painted and slightly lopsided, celebrating local legends, Frank Whitmore and the award-winning Olive Grove of Provence.
Rows of folding chairs were filled with neighbors, farmers, shopkeepers, and a few tourists who had heard about the man who saved his land with grit and grandchildren. At the front sat a wooden podium flanked by state officials. A golden medallion and framed certificate rested on a nearby table. The moment Frank stepped in, the room broke into applause. He stopped cold in the doorway. "Go," Martha whispered. "They're not clapping for the oil." Frank walked slowly down the aisle, nodding awkwardly to neighbors he'd once avoided at the hardware store. Somewhere in the crowd he caught Nate's eye. The old man raised a thumb and mouthed, "'Bout damn time." At the edge of the third row, Eleanor sat between Alex and Lily, her hands clasped tight in her lap. Theo sat beside them, legs swinging, his tie clip shining in the light. When Frank reached the podium, the crowd quieted. He looked down at the notes Martha had forced him to write the night before, then folded them up and put them in his pocket. "I'm not good with speeches," he began. Laughter rippled through the room. "I'm not good with talking much at all. Used to think that was a strength, keeping things in, staying quiet. But turns out it's just a way of saying nothing when people need to hear something." He paused. 17 years ago, I lost my daughter. Not to death, but to silence. I thought time would fix it. I thought love unspoken still counted. I was wrong." Eleanor's eyes shimmered. "This summer, my grandkids showed up on my doorstep, unannounced, unhappy, and unimpressed. And I deserved all of that. But what they didn't know is that they saved me, every single one of them. They taught me how to talk again, how to listen, how to grow something more important than olives." He looked directly at Theo. "They taught me how to be someone worth coming back to." The room went still. Frank reached for the certificate, but didn't lift it. "This award means a lot. Not because it says I make good oil, but because it says hard things like land and family are worth holding on to, even when they try to leave you." Applause rose again, louder this time. Frank stepped down from the stage and walked straight to Eleanor. She stood, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then she threw her arms around him. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't Hollywood, but it was the kind of hug that mended old scars from the inside out. After the ceremony, they returned to the farmhouse for a gathering under the olive trees. Long tables were spread with food. Laughter floated through the branches. Theo gave an impromptu speech that began with, "My grandpa used to be grumpy, but now he's just loud," which earned roars of laughter. Later that night, the family sat on the porch as dusk wrapped around the grove like a blanket. Frank pulled out an old guitar, one he hadn't touched in years. Lily blinked. "Wait, you play?" "Used to. Thought I might remember a few things." He strummed once. It was out of tune. He laughed and kept playing anyway. It wasn't perfect. Neither was he. But the melody settled into the night like it had always belonged there. Eleanor closed her eyes and leaned back. Martha rested her head on Frank's shoulder. Lily curled up with a book at the end of the swing. Alex had his headphones on but was smiling to himself, and Theo had fallen asleep in a rocking chair, a blanket tucked around him, a chocolate smudge on his cheek. Frank kept playing. And the song? The song stayed. It moved through the branches and into the soil. It soaked into the walls of the house, into the grooves of the porch steps, into the pages of Theo's half-finished book. It stayed in the hearts of those who thought they'd lost each other. It stayed through the end of the summer, and it would echo, quietly and forever, in the place where the olive trees stood tall, and one stubborn old man finally learned how to let love speak. Before you go, we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Share your city or your corner of the world in the comments below. It always warms our hearts to see how far these stories travel. And if this one touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own family or gave you even a moment of stillness, please consider subscribing to Moments That Heal. This channel is built for people who believe in second chances, in soft strength,
and in stories that don't shout, but stay. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next story.